My name is Diana Moore, and I'm going to share a couple things about me that will give you more of an idea of who I am a little bit as it relates to this particular presentation. In May of 2019, encouraged by my tribal CERT manager, I received my tech and general amateur radio licenses and my extra in July of the same year. And my success with wilderness contesting and interest in ecom radio as well as education, radio education, led me down a road to become an active ARRL field instructor and examiner as well as a VE. And I also honed additional training in beginning CW, in message handling from NTS and RRI. Currently, I participate with Carson City Aries Races team here in Nevada. And additionally, I enjoy onboarding Aries Races members and supporting amateur operators, as well as potential operators of all ages. I'm a FEMA trainer for CERT and instructor for the American Red Cross and the American Academy of Surgeons. And professionally, I have a broad background in training as an RN, a public health nurse, a doctor in naturopathy. I have a certification as a massage therapist and many years of experience in medicine, holistic medicine, public health research, in business and business as a business consultant, as a psychotherapist, and in education as a college founder and administrator and professor. I've had a lot of opportunities to work abroad, and I am currently part of the RATPAC planning team, and I want to thank my team members and all of you for the opportunity to present tonight's topic, themes that can build amateur radio's future. My contact information, email is on qrz.com. So please sit back and enjoy the slideshow. So in tonight's presentation, part one will be choosing what amateur radio brings into our lives. Part two, an interview with historical figure Hiram Percy Maxim, W1AD. Part three, what are amateur radio groups and organizations? Part four, dynamics of the change process for you, groups and organizations. 5, groups and organizations depend on you to become their future. Part 6, 2 club member experiences that can build amateur radio's future. Part 7, every day you decide the future of amateur radio. And then in part 8, it just lists the resources that I used for this presentation. You are the future of amateur radio. Welcome. Part 1, choosing what amateur radio brings into our daily lives. Every day you decide, how will you use amateur radio today? For direct communication, such as wilderness contesting, as a Mars operator, or talking to global friends, or ISIS to Earth, or for discovery, such as using digital modes, drone applications, or group activities. For outdoor adventures, such as SOTA, summits on the air, POTA, parks on the air, or microwave. For exploration and research, such as satellite communications, moon bounce, or comet tail, bouncing the signal off the comet tail. What's your idea? For community and partner field emergency radio service, such as in shelters, with the reserves, or locally. Even during your commute and at work, you think about amateur radio, listen to amateur radio, and or talk over amateur radio. Often you'll have opportunities to practice visionary invention, solving the unsolvable, or astounding MacGyverish creative innovation. And of course, all for a good cause. Challenges simply add to your radio fun. Do you need more power? A different frequency, a different mode, a change of location, to check for loose connectors or to check your coax? How about to check the antenna or to consider changes in propagation? To check for radio interference or reboot your computer? Or maybe to check your program settings, etc. Well, Waldo easily discovered practical solutions to his challenges by teaming up with his radio friends, family, and neighbors. Obstacles such as local antenna restrictions only serve to encourage you to discover, implement, and share creative solutions. What's your everyday mindset? Can do. But the impossible, it might take a little longer. And hang on one second, I have to move that there. Success of modern technology use in daily life reflects many contributions of amateur radio operators. Amateurs are a diverse group, inclusive of the global community. They utilize timeless values linking past, present, and future. They have an inspiring history that's fascinating, instructive, and applicable to our times. You connect past, present, and future. You are the future of amateur radio. Part 2. An interview with historical figure Hiram Percy Maxim, W1 AD. Hiram Percy Maxim was born in 1869 in Brooklyn, New York. He died in 1936 in La Junta, Colorado at age 66. Here's a brief biography. He was an engineer, inventor, manufacturer, astronomer, and an amateur radio operator, as well as a filmmaker, writer, author, and hobbyist. He was the organizer of the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL, the organizer of the International Amateur Radio Union, the IARU, organizer of the Amateur Cinema League in 1926, a lobbyist for amateur radio interest, family man, social community leader, an inspirational mentor and friend. So, Hiram, here's my first question. What inspired you to organize the ARRL? Experiencing frustration with poor propagation. One day, in 1914, I was unable to reach a friend by amateur radio a mere 30 miles away. This left me with only a few choices: catch a ride, drive myself, pay to send a telegraph message, or suddenly it came to me, why not have another radio operator relay my message onto my friend? My innovative visionary idea of radio operators acting as message relays was immediately supported by my friends and a local radio club. A year later, in 1915, There were so many radio operators across the nation participating in my idea to relay messages by amateur radio that it was necessary to form our own organization, separate from the local radio club. This organization continues to be called the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Hiram, in 1915, how did the ARRL support amateur radio operators and enthusiasts? We were there for everyone, radio operators and enthusiasts. We succeeded where other organizations failed because we insisted from the very beginning that no selfish motive from anybody or anything should ever prevail. Everything that the ARRL undertakes must be 100% for the general good. And that policy bred loyalty and confidence. With those two things, an organization can prosper forever. Now, add mutual forbearance, control of selfishness, and teamwork. Secondly, the League is a property of all of us together, not intended in any way as a money-making scheme, but entirely for our mutual assistance. We grew quickly through sharing the common interest of doing service for one another. We published a monthly QST journal that fills a long felt want by amateurs and is available for purchase by all. We encouraged amateur radio research and run an active testing lab. We actively communicate with our members, including by correspondence, and we promote competent operators by creating standards supported by disciplinary measures. Hiram, tell us about the ARRL's first emergency communication demonstration for the U.S. government officials. The event was titled Washington's Birthday Amateur Relay Message. By 1915, we had trained enough amateur radio relay operators nationally that many of our members felt we should demonstrate our capacity and capability to the government officials as a viable means to handle national emergency communications. Again, let me stress that the possible use of our messaging relay operators for emergency communication was supported by many of our members and radio enthusiasts. While emergency communication was not of great interest to me personally, I supported this keen interest of others as I understood how it met the needs of the greater good. Let me tell you about our planning activity. Before planning this enterprising national endeavor, we asked all our members to give us their ideas on how we should carry out a successful demonstration. We were surprised and delighted to receive so many replies from those willing to support us. Almost everyone had something to suggest. Since there were so many great ideas, we integrated as many as possible into a successful plan. In 1916, following our plan, we surpassed all the U.S. government officials' expectations and requirements with flying colors. A final point that I would like to make about the League: involvement in emergency communication. The League has its own organization and own methods of handling this organization. They might not suit the government's needs, yet are satisfactory to its own membership. This is a very old story, to those who have been connected with matters of this kind. My personal view, yes, but perhaps a good membership discussion topic. Did your relay operators encounter any obstacles? Surprisingly, our biggest obstacle was jealousy due to self-importance. Really, our plan was so well crafted and operators so well experienced that the only obstacle we faced was some infighting between members. There was jealousy between operators of special stations, first-class amateur stations, and the little fellow with the gas engine coil and a few dry batteries. Locally, one operator would claim that he was always jammed by another when a relay message came through. Seeing that this attitude stemmed from jealousy due to self-importance, I diplomatically handled this situation by nipping the struggle in the bud through comments in our published monthly QST magazine. As a disciplinary measure, I wrote that their jealousy due to self-importance threatened the success of our plans and told them that we would only succeed if all of our operators worked together. I made it clear that it was not equipment nor power source that accounted for a competent radio operator. Hiram, earlier you talked about promoting competent operators by creating standards supported by disciplinary measures. Can you give me an example? Well, here, laughingly, Hiram described the early days of the league and the discipline he penned out as Tom, the old man, versus interference, also known as rotten sending. Well, it was about this era that we began to organize radio clubs with highfalutin ambitions about promoting radio communication and controlling interference. But Hiram, what's rotten sending? Here are 3 examples transcribed in my personal CW logbook. Rather, let me give you 2 examples because these became famous ARRL symbols. Here's the first. Yes, just with glicky, wait, moody, woof, hung, blissfully, monkey, motor. Now, can you tell me what is a woof hung and what does it have to do with monkeys? Now, as all operators know, you have to guess a whole lot in wireless, and how would you guess this? Brugrum, bru, rotary, gi, woof, with my set ready snitch, spitty, tone hit, in potimus. I could never make any sense of this. Can you? What did you and the league do about rotten sending? First, the QST magazine joined me under my pen name Tom, and together suggested disciplinary actions members could take to address rotten sending, or rotten QRM. These reflected a proposed standard and accountability for QRM conversations. We suggested members need to come to an agreement that it is bad form to indulge in long conversations and boycott those stations that do. Secondly, improper calling. This could be improved by emphasizing this as bad form. For unnecessary repetition, it's easily addressed by sending steady, even, and at a moderately slow pace. Thoughtless testing. Operators need to agree not to do testing during schedule message relay periods and improper use of the spark coil. Here, members can suggest that those operators join the ARRL and learn proper technique. Second, I introduced 3 symbols inspired by rotten sending. 2 of them, the Hong and Ready Snitch, became widely known. Let me tell you a bit first about the Wolf Hong. The Wolf Hong became a symbol of self-discipline for ARRL members. The Wolf Hong instrument represented the external standards and accountability set for all ARRL members by the members themselves. It also served to represent the internalization of the ARRL standards by accountability enforced by an operator's own conscience. Secondly, I sent a Wolf Hong to the ARRL directors in 1919. The occasion was when the directors met for the first time after World War I to lay plans for reconstruction of the League. Tom sent it to Lieutenant Warner, the new secretary editor, an absolutely authoritative and well-preserved specimen of the Wolf Hong. When it was displayed at the directors' meeting, well, each face noticeably blanched. And this was hung in the secretary editor's office, where it remains today. In July 1919, the QST published the first photo of the Wolf Hong. Additionally, I was critical of the government's delay in reinstating amateur radio post-World War I. I expressed my criticism in a 1919 QST article, Rotten Sending, by Tom, which concluded by saying Tom was sending officials a Wolf Hong for use as amateurs took to the airwaves. Then there's the Ready Snitch, a symbol for decency in operating. It was presented to traffic manager Fred Schnell in 1921 by the DC Radio Club. And finally, here are a few other interesting points. In 1917, ARRL members pestered the QST editor, desiring to order Wolf Hong, so a QST article was written by an active ARRL member stating that it was a recent invention and not on the market yet. Secondly, in Modesto, California, the Radio Club's annual trophy became a replica of the Wolf Hong. And finally, an amateur group in Flint, Michigan, initiated a mystical society called the Royal Order of the Wolf Hong. Thank you, Hiram, for your insightful comments that are still invaluable for us today. You are the future of amateur radio. Part 3. What are the amateur radio groups and what are amateur radio groups and organizations? Through groups and organizations, everyone can be welcome to operate radio technology together. Amateur operators choose to create and associate with amateur groups and organizations. Each group or organization creates a unique expression or culture engaging the technology of social agreements for welcoming radio operators and enthusiasts, supporting interest and nurturing passionate enthusiasm, for celebrating experiences of exploration, discovery, and research, and supporting visionary inventions, for celebrating challenging opportunities for growth and development, and volunteering their skills in public service. for creating opportunities for fun and fellowship, for radio science education and testing, mentoring radio arts and skills, for inspiring, sharing, and implementing creative solutions, for solving the unsolvable through the can-do mindset, for change and transformation plans, for communications, written, verbal, radio, or other forms, for engaging with formal and informal organizational structures, accountability and disciplinary measures, and for determining perception, for determining things like similarities, differences, the peer effect, do people look like me? And this could be either internal or external. Amateur groups and organizations are as unique as you. Two major differences in groups and organizational structures reflecting distinctive interpretations of the technology of social agreements. Traditional groups include legacy clubs, nonprofits, and other common structures with autocratic culture. They require the use of paperwork or a paper trail, including applications, constitutions, bylaws, written codes of conduct addressing weaknesses and liabilities, strategic plans, accounts, dues, elections, overt litigation concerns, etc. Diversity and the change process present challenges to authoritative structures, to resources, and are considered inconvenient, often leading to demise. Growth, development, and change are dependent upon authoritarian control and hierarchy. And branding, not function, are key. Personal autonomy is often minimized. Non-traditional groups and organizations include non-legacy, self-organizing, interdisciplinary, diverse groups or organizations with a flat community-based culture. Virtue value-based codes of conduct define standards by addressing strengths. There is accountability and enforcement of standards, both the letter and the spirit. There is no dependence upon a paper trail and no dues. Diversity and the change process are expected, instructive, and empowering. Growth and development are dependent upon basic mutual respect and function, not branding is key, and personal autonomy is maximized. Groups and organizations can have many differences, but what do they have in common? First, they share a definition. Groups and organizations are a business, a society, or groups of people working together to achieve a particular purpose, objectives, or to create something. Second, groups and organizations cannot exist without people. People such as yourself. Members of a group or organization use the technology of social agreements to allow them to work together to achieve a particular purpose, objectives, or to create something. What is the technology of social agreements? A conceptual organizational technology that comprises cultural and elemental forces that structure human relationship dynamics and activities. It's linguistic based. It utilizes verbal, nonverbal, and abstract languaging. It's multidimensional. It's used by groups of people and you, the individual. It instructs the mind and senses and has aspects of time and timelessness. For example, it can integrate past, present, and future. It's considered a necessity for groups and organizational life, since the elemental forces behind a group or organization's technology of social agreements are the dynamics of change. Part 4. The dynamics of the change process for you, groups, or organizations. What are the dynamics of the change process for you, groups, or organizations? The dynamics of the change process are necessary for you, as well as groups or organizational life. The dynamics of the change process are organized and structured by using the technology of social agreements to manipulate the relationship agreements between three elemental forces: creation, maintenance, and destruction. This manipulation is responsible for differences in culture, history, and outcomes between groups and organizations, even though they may have the same intended purpose, objectives, or activities. This difference is related to how people engage with the three elemental forces of change. So there's two symbols on the page to represent the change process. The first is ideal non-traditional cultural dynamics of change. And here you see in this symbol all of the elemental forces, even though they may be separate forces, they all connect together, and they will all stay connected together. In the second symbol, you see that it's ideal for the traditional cultural dynamics of change. And here, the different elemental forces are separated from one another. Even though they connect, they're still separate from one another. The dynamics of change is what Kurt Lewin called the change process. Kurt Lewin was born in September 9, 1890, to a Jewish merchant family in the German Empire. He died February 12, 1947, in Newtonville, Massachusetts, at the age of 57. Lewin's social psychology model was introduced in the 1940s and is still just as relevant today. It integrates group, organizational culture, or social agreements with the science of social psychology. Lewin coined the term group dynamics to describe how individuals and groups react to changing environments. And he formulated that behavior, or B, is a product of the function, or F, of the interaction of a person, or it could be a group, P, and the environment. And you can see his formula here. His change process continues to remain one of the top organizational development and change management models used today. Since it is relational based, it can be employed continually. For traditional structures, continually means integrating a change plan into appropriate aspects of organizational documentation. For non-traditional structures, continually means integrating the dynamics of change directly into all aspects of group and organizational behavior. Three phases of the change process. So in Lewin's model, let's look at the three phases. Phase 1 is called Unfreeze. Phase 2 is called Change, and Phase 3 is called Freeze. Now let's compare the change process for non-traditional groups and organizations and traditional groups and organizations. So let's see, the first. Non-traditional groups consider phases to be integrated. Traditional groups consider the phases to be separate. Non-traditional groups see the change process as an opportunity for learning in groups, while traditional groups see it as laborious, challenging, and painful. Non-traditional groups see the change process as something that requires clear perception about what's happening in real time, and traditional groups, they require concrete guidelines. Non-traditional groups consider the change process a normal, low-risk activity, while traditional groups consider that as being rare, a high-risk activity. Non-traditional groups see change as creating simultaneous connections, while traditional groups see it as creating a crisis from the top down. Non-traditional groups see it as an opportunity to work with virtue value-based agreements. Traditional groups require editing the paper trail. Non-traditional groups see change as a negligible expense, while traditional groups, it can be very expensive. And finally, success in non-traditional groups reflects transparency, networking, and teamwork, while in traditional groups, success requires expert consultation. The change process is due to a change in relationship agreements between three interdependent elemental forces. So let's look at the three phases of change in the Lewin's model. Phase 1, unfreeze. It requires an awareness that change is needed or imminent. And members must recognize that they constitute a group due to interdependence of fate. Additionally, the group becomes aware of relationships of the elemental forces of change. And finally, Lewin provided a tool called the Action Research Tool. So when you use this tool, you start with research. What needs to change? What's going on here? You then move to fact-finding, and based on what you discover, take action. And then you evaluate what happened. And then again, based on the evaluation, you take more action, and the cycle can continue. Phase 2, change. When you actually put the changes that you've decided upon to work, the new transparent relationships agreements are formed. These allow the elemental forces of change to be reset in real time. Ideally, all group organization members are involved on an equal and open basis. Phase 3, freeze. It's when new agreements are put into action. New ideals bring an interdependent balance of the elemental forces. All interdependent relationships are in agreement. There is hopefully excellent communication, and participation must continue. Needed ongoing action research to support the group organization. And importantly, group life is never without change, but differences exist in the amount and type of change. And the change process for traditional groups and organizations requires a complete dismantling process. Phase 1, or the unfreezing phase, is accomplished by destruction of previous social agreements. Phase 2, or change, is accomplished by creation of new social agreements. And phase 3, freeze, by maintaining new social agreements. For traditional groups, change is linear. There's a beginning where a new birth and a growth and then end and a death. So sometimes that really reflects how if we've been an amateur radio operator a long time, we tend to sometimes feel that, oh my gosh, things are ending. Is amateur radio going to survive? So that reflects this kind of linear change. So let's take a look at a traditional group. And here the elemental forces are separate from each other. And I've created a little tinker toy object to represent the old form. So to make a new form, we've got to dismantle the old form. So phase one, we've got to destroy the old form and then move to phase two, begin to create a new form. And here's our new form. And now we've got to maintain it, phase three, through our new social agreements. And then here's just a symbolic representation. The group, they've made it. Here's their new form. But it's not a continuous process. Now let's look at the change process for non-traditional groups and organizations. It's a continuous, interdependent process. The phases are the same. So phase one, unfreezing by destruction of previous social agreements. Phase two, change by creation of new social agreements. And phase three, maintaining new social agreements. So before we look at the symbols, the change process is continuous. So you connect past, present, and future. So wherever you are as a person, you connect the past, present, and future for amateur radio. Well, now let's move into, here's our old form. And we want to create a new form. So the first thing we're going to do is phase one, unfreeze by destruction. But notice here, destruction also contains the other two elements of create and maintain. So the only thing that gets destroyed is what is no longer useful. Then when that group moves to phase two, create moves in. And so whatever needs to be created is very active in doing so. But again, it's in connection with the other two elements. Phase three, maintain. So maintain moves in. But again, all the three elements are still in connection and the new form is created. Now, the unique thing here is that this is a continuous process. So when these groups and organizations meet, every day they may see amazing, change process going on in their group experience. Part 5, groups and organizations depend on you to become their future. A story, a glimpse of change within an informal, traditional group of amateur radio operators. This story begins with you and your friends. 2 fellow operators have invited you to join a local group of hams that meets at a restaurant every Wednesday at 12 noon. Your friends reassure you any amateur who's interested can join in. But this week, we might be a little late, but don't worry. We're a welcoming bunch. And just tell them we sent you. Entering the restaurant, you hear a group of people talking about amateur radio topics. With a friendly smile on your face, you walk over to the table wanting to introduce yourself. No one seems to notice you. You are standing beside an empty seat and decide to sit down and listen to the animated conversation. But even in informal, traditional groups, meeting for the joy of socializing with other amateur radio operators, the technology of social agreements non-verbally prescribes expected behaviors of the group and its members towards non-members like you. What do you think happened next? Hey, you're sitting in somebody else's seat. Has this ever happened to you? Tension is building. For a split second, you look around trying to make sense of what you've just been told. So just where is this mysterious somebody whose seat you have taken? Change process, phase 1, unfreezing. Will the group members consider changing their agreement and let you participate? Change process, phase 2, change. Suddenly one of the group members starts to laugh, and then others join in and you follow along. The group tension subsides, giving you a chance to ask, where would you like me to sit? Looking up, you notice everyone is smiling. Someone sitting next to you offers, sit down right here where you are. It's okay. That's your chair now. Change process, phase 3, freeze. Then a group member calls the waitress to bring you a cup of coffee. The informal structure of a traditional group or organization is not written down, nor is it always spoken or even consciously known to group members. Well, congratulations and welcome to the group. Let's review a summary of the traditional informal group change process. Here's an illustration of the old agreement. In phase 1, unfreezing by destruction of previous social agreements. Phase 2, change by creation of new social agreements. The smile definitely helped. Phase 3, freeze by maintaining new social agreements with the welcome to the group. And here's a new group agreement, and she's got her own chair now. And when her friends come back, they'll have to find some new chairs. Tips that build the future. When you meet people, instead of sizing them up and down, recognize the great things they are capable of. Look for the great values and virtues they carry within them. Begin to appreciate even the little things they do. As a Spanish proverb reminds us, everyone smiles in the same language. You are the future of amateur radio. Part 6. 2 club members' experiences that can build the future. An amateur radio club member story. Just like many other hams throughout the amateur radio's history, you have chosen to be an active member of at least one amateur radio club. There are so many clubs to choose from. For example, local, state, national, or even international. The future looks bright. You found a good fit for you where you enjoy sharing your interests, gain support for your enthusiasm, feel inspired to think outside the box, celebrate your experiences, make new discoveries, meet challenges as opportunities, and trust the change process as group wisdom. Another amateur radio club member story. Well, your story sounds nice and lovely, but get real. What about my club? There's cyberbullying, name-calling, harassment, mean words, lies, threats, insults, gossip, rumors, teasing. The same old stories. domination, blame, bullies, ignored, disempowered, and power plays. Just look at the ethical problems some members are creating. When I offer my help, rather than just complain, I was bullied, harassed, and publicly humiliated. When I approached those involved, I was completely ignored. It's hopeless. I feel angry, devalued, isolated, and disempowered. Other members do too, and some are leaving the club. It wasn't always like this. I think the leadership is afraid of creating a code of conduct and enforcing it. This situation is intolerable. Change process, phase 1. Unfreeze. Honest self-inquiry. So now what do I do? This situation is intolerable for my well-being as a person, as an amateur radio operator, and as a club member. Practical considerations for intolerable group organizational situations. What makes situations intolerable? An ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemmas occur when any situation requires an individual, leaders, and/or group organization to choose between conflicting actions or equally unacceptable actions. Moral distress. When ethical dilemmas are not resolved, a situation feels intolerable, and moral distress occurs along with the emergence of multiple physical, emotional, and mental pathologies. What can prevent or mitigate moral distress? Membership required resources and processes that promote ongoing ethical awareness, education, and discussion, that provide practical understanding of ethical decision making, that prepare amateurs to address ethical concerns, and provide strategies and resources to prevent moral distress, that provide codes of conduct, including enforcement, consequences, and ongoing evaluations of effectiveness, and finally, collaborative discussions with partners and resources. How can an amateur group or organizational members develop and grow through engaging ethical dilemmas? By following, enforcing codes of conduct that provide defined standards of behavior for all members, that reflect Lewin's formula. B, behavior is a function, F, of the person or group, P, and the internal and external environment. That use codes of conduct to support mutual respect, which becomes a common thread weaving through every expectation, interaction, goal, and activity. That support practical applications of agreed upon values defined as virtues, that allow members to be aware of how virtues are the foundation for group organizational growth and development, and how to translate them into values, that provide all members with a clear plan for enforcement of codes of conduct and concrete consequences for violation of both the letter and the law, that promote codes of conduct as a support resource to members and groups during the change process, and that promote codes of conduct as a universal bridge between group members, members of other groups, the general public, and all levels of society by facilitating teamwork, sharing, discussion, mutual aid, and successful goal attainment. change process, phase 2. I've made changes. My social agreements now reflect my values. I created a code of conduct for myself. By following my code of conduct, I have developed respect for myself and others. I found an amateur club where I could thrive as well. Let me share with you my operator code of conduct. I call it a hallmark of my amateur spirit. Connection. I respect all amateur operators as equitable to myself and one another. Considerate. I enjoy sharing the airways and group activities with other amateurs through respecting and fostering enjoyment by all. Polite. I make a point to communicate and behave in ways that reflect uplifting cultural expectations and leave making judgments about others behind. Friendly and kind. When relating to others, I'm willing to demonstrate patience, kind assistance, cooperation, and respect their interests. Progressive. When I notice a problem, I'm willing to participate in creating a winning solution. Balanced. I integrate my amateur radio interest with the other important aspects of my daily life. Loyal. I offer my unique skills in service for the greater good, including the amateur community, public, my country, and international community. Excellence. I always offer my best efforts. This includes caring for my equipment, my operating style and skills, ongoing self-inquiry, encouraging others, and celebrating accomplishments. Now, let me introduce you to the new club I attend. The interdisciplinary ham scene welcomes you. The future looks bright. Care to join us? How can you recognize the interdisciplinary ham radio scene and what agreements define our culture? We are the originators of the innovative amateur radio source work. We do things to make it easy to thrive. Our strategic planning and roadmaps emerge from paying close attention to what community projects say they need and careful observation of project development. Our interdisciplinary scene culture is a rich resource of vibrant, diverse, and inclusive qualities of organization with respect to function. And function naturally presents and chooses necessary cultural agreements, including codes of conduct or standards of behavior that support transparency, accountability, and respect. This allows for the creation of mutually respectful groups to achieve common goals through fun, exciting, and transformative or life-giving activities. Our operating style is bottom-up and emergent. We globally share common design patterns. We are guided by an enforced collective commitment to a defined set of shared values that inform community standards, including code of conduct. Codes of conduct are values and are dynamic. Codes of conduct and values are dynamic. Codes of conduct reflect foundation values. Foundation values create and maintain the working environment of the interdisciplinary ham radio scene, and they are based on virtues such as accountability, transparency, and respect. Three key values: respect, transparency, and accountability. Respect, a powerful human virtue technology. Respect the other person's model of the world. Respect our environment, each other, and ourselves through the cycle of respect. So when we respect for others and acknowledge their potential, we're able to use their abilities well. That creates meaning and purpose and lets people give of their best, fully recognizing people's contributions. When respect is added to dignity, there is inclusion. We each have a piece of the puzzle. The virtue of transparency is person to person. Resources allows an integration of multitude of resources, allows for clarity of self-reflection and inquiry, and simplicity organizes a plethora of things into something that's quite workable and understood. Accountability, a virtue inferring rules and caring. Accountability is drawing out the best in others, allowing for excellence. Accountability allows for consistency. We become what we want to be by consistently being what we want to become each day. Accountability is for people who row together, who know and enjoy teamwork. Change process, phase 3. Maintain. I've made some great changes. I look forward to deciding each day how I will engage with amateur radio. I love relating to club members now. Our club activities and projects are inspiring and are opening doors to new possibilities for me. Through club activities, I am gaining new skills, interests, and valuable experiences. My family, friends, and people at work have noticed the positive changes in me. Some have chosen to attend the club, and others are studying for their amateur licensing exam. The future looks bright. You are the future of amateur radio. Part 7. Every day you decide the future of amateur radio. Every day you decide the future of amateur radio. How will you use amateur radio today? In creating a bright future, or wondering what future? You are the future of amateur radio. Smile at your chosen destiny. The future looks bright. And our coyote and is able to get along here with Roadrunner, standing on enforced codes of conduct based on the foundation values, or based on foundation values based on virtues. Thank you for participating. And then part 8 is the resources you can go back through on your own. I drawn out the ones for Hiram, but also the QST resources have a lot from Hiram in them. The Wolf Hong and Ready Snitch, Amateur Radio Code of Conduct, Kurt Lewin, Groups and Organizational Changes, and other resources. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Do we have any questions?
I got one from the chat.
All right, go for it.
AJ6HO, Loretta from California, wants to know, can a group use both aspects, some aspects of both types of groups? Can you be traditional and non-traditional at the same time, or is either all one or the other?
Yeah, you absolutely can. This was a beginning introductory presentation. And I would say, you've got one extreme, you've got the other, and everything in between is fair game. Use whatever's going to work for the situation that you have.
Okay.
They're all good. Everything's good. Did
that answer your question, Loretta? If she's even still here.
Yeah, is there anybody else in chat or elsewhere?
I know a bunch of people had to leave, but everybody should know this is being recorded, so you could always go back and watch it later, so you didn't have to furiously write down all of the resources. You'll be able to get them when Jan puts out the slides.
You betcha. You'll get that when I send the things out, and we'll hopefully get done by tomorrow sometime. Okay.
And Loretta said in the chat that yes, the question was answered properly.
Okay. Well, I don't see any hands up. I don't see any questions unless you do, Barry.
Nope, we're good. Elizabeth Green wants to know, how does this apply to the new Forest Service proposal? I'm not sure how I can answer that.
Sure.
Well, the one thing you have to ask yourself, the Forestry Service did not ask for you to help them. So what you can do is look at how is the Forestry Service decision and their group behavior affecting you personally, and just go through the self-reflection process, very much like that second club member did. The one that had said change process 2, and he was looking at himself in the mirror and looking for the reflection, and feeling like, this is totally intolerable. So you can work with it that way, because if it feels intolerable inside, it's creating physiological changes that can actually be damaging and harmful to you. So you want to work on that self-processing. There's a reference in the organization list that's called the work, and that's a really good tool. It asks 4 questions, and you answer 4 simple questions, and it works with a simple turnaround, and that can really help you gain some insight in how their behavior is hooking you in, so that you can't be that dynamic self that you would be if they didn't have that behavior.
Well, that goes through their behavior. It's going to be hard to swallow by law people that can't have repeaters anymore.
Well, Hiram went through the same thing with the governments, and if you look at the QST articles that I referenced, he went through the very same thing, and then I quoted a part of him on the talk about government organizations. So sometimes reading those old QSTs, you can really get a sense of, I'm not alone here. How did they handle such things?
Good idea. Good plan.
Yes.
Some things don't change, guys. So those QSTs, and I have to say the QSTs and the style they're written, they're very transparent with stuff like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Anybody else? Comments? All right. With that being the case, I'm going to let you off the hook there, Diana. And
Right.
we'll close this session down this time, and look forward to the people joining us tomorrow.
Okay, and if anything comes up, people can always email me. They can get my address on QRZ.
Okay. Sounds good.
Alrighty. Thank you, everybody.